You're listening to episode 67 of Present Moment. Welcome to Present Moment, Mindfulness, Practice, and Science. I'm Ted Meissner. Present Moment is a podcast with interviews, conversations, and roundtable discussions. We speak with mindfulness teachers about their newest findings published in peer-reviewed science journals, teachers about their understanding and methods as they work with students of mindfulness, authors about their books and interests, and we also speak with everyday practitioners. The website presentmomentmindfulness.com has show notes for each episode along with resource materials. Gleb Tsipursky joins us to speak about how mindfulness and science can help us with intentionality. When was the last time you did something without thinking about it? Careful reflection, or even awareness? If you're like me, probably within the past few minutes. A movement, a word, even complex tasks like driving are often done without full intentionality. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. We're not trying to demonize what may have been an evolutionary adaptation. But we may want to consider how our lives might be improved with a little more mindful consideration and intentional insight. Gleb Tsipursky's passion for helping people use science to make effective decisions and reach their goals led him and his wife, Agnes Vishnevkin, to co-found Intentional Insights in the winter of 2014. Since that time, Gleb has collaborated with a group of like-minded enthusiasts to translate academic research on rational thinking and emotional intelligence into pragmatic strategies for a wide audience. He was always excited about such ideas, leading him to get a PhD researching the intersection of history and psychology, specifically focusing on emotions, meaning and purpose, decision-making, and agency in historical contexts. Gleb currently holds a tenure-track professorship at The Ohio State University and is a member of the Decision Sciences Collaborative there. He published dozens of peer-reviewed essays in academic venues in the US, UK, France, Germany, Russia, and elsewhere, as well as numerous popular articles, and serves on a number of boards, for instance as the science advisor on the Planet Purpose Advisory Board. Our guest today is Gleb Tsipursky. Gleb, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Ted. Thanks for having me on the podcast.
Very glad to have you here, and thanks to our friend Rick Heller for making the introduction and making sure that this was happening. I'd like to start, Gleb, by asking you to tell us about your background, particularly in science and critical thinking and emotional intelligence.
Sure. Happy to share about that. I think I was always interested, even as a kid. I remember myself being interested in critical thinking, kind of understanding the world around us. Why do people make the decisions they do? How do we function as human beings? How do we decide and interact within groups as individuals? And how can we understand the world around us? So it's been a long time question of interest for me. Partially as a result of that interest, I went into my professional field, which is history, the history of science, at the intersection of psychology, cognitive neuroscience, behavioral economics, and other similar disciplines. So that's the science that I study as a historian of science. The reason I decided to go into history of science in particular is because I can intersect and cross many disciplinary boundaries. History is a very broad discipline that doesn't require sticking to any specific framework. So I can draw on a lot of different disciplines in analyzing psychology, cognitive neuroscience, and behavioral economics. And that's what led me to choose history. And specifically, I focused on the history of the Soviet Union, which is the really big alternative modernity to the United States. And I really wanted to figure out how people made decisions, how they interacted within groups, what made people tick in a society that was really different from our own, to get away from those natural biases that come when we study our own society, the society that I grew up in. So I got my degree. I went to UNC Chapel Hill to get my degree. And then I went to Ohio State University, where I teach right now as a tenure track professor. So that's my background in specifically history, the history of science, critical thinking. That's where I'm coming from, that research-based perspective.
It must have been interesting. I'm wondering if you can share some of the things that you discovered just as cultural differences between the Soviet Union and the United States in how people engage with one another. What did you learn?
Yeah, fascinating question. One of the things I learned was that people in the Soviet Union tend to be much more collectively oriented, and they tend to be much more thinking about the needs of other people and how they interact with other people, and much more aware of their social dynamics around them. So in the United States, we have a very strong individualist mindset. And that causes us to sometimes disregard the needs of other people and desires of other people and their presence, and not be aware of the impact we're having on other people's lives. In the Soviet Union, there's a much greater awareness of the kind of impact that one is making on other people's lives. And there's much more intersections and ties between oneself and other people. So I think that's one big difference. We can talk about that, or I can talk about another difference. So I'll make sure.
Let's find another one. I think that one is insightful, and that's a difference that many of us who don't have your experience and background would understand quite as well. But I'm curious about what some of the other nuggets you might have uncovered are.
Sure. So I think another really fundamental nugget is that the Soviet Union, that all people, regardless of where they are, have certain needs, emotional needs, psychological needs and desires. And the United States society, Western society provides certain structures to fulfill those needs. And the Soviet Union, in some ways, fulfilled those needs through providing different structures. I'll give you an example. So, for example, in the United States, religion provides the major source of community bonding, sense of meaning and purpose, sense of satisfaction, a way to serve others, and a way to find one's ideals and morals and ethics. In the Soviet Union, it's just happenstance that religion came to provide this service, this social service in the United States. It's because that's where our traditions came from. Now, in the Soviet Union, people found their ethics, morals, sense of meaning and purpose, sense of community, a way of serving others through different secular institutions, which is really interesting if you think about it, that it just shows that it's not about the specific institution itself. We can talk about the Soviet institutions if you're curious about them. But it's about those basic needs that human beings have. And so that really helps me get away from my biases where, I am automatically associated, and we all generally tend to automatically associate, religion with sense of community, meaning and purpose, and so on, ethics, morals, but it's just happenstance. We can have other institutions that fulfill those basic underlying human needs, not religious ones.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's interesting to hear you bring it up because I have the conversation now almost on a weekly basis that when it comes to contemplative practices and locations, people who complete a mindfulness program, whether it's MBSR or some other mindfulness-based program, are then sent to religious centers to continue their practice, because my case is that there aren't secular centers available. And I wonder what it would be like. And I invite the listener and the people I'm speaking with at these times to imagine what it would have been like if, instead of a local Zen center or Buddhist vihara or some other institution that is foundationally based in a religious tradition, what if you had a secular practice center? What if it was one that was appealing to those same needs you have, as you're saying, Gleb, that didn't have that infrastructure? Would you be a convert to a religious structure still, or would that perhaps not have happened? I'm curious how that goes over time, as perhaps we see an increase in the number, even one would be nice, of secular practice centers that are not even subtly Buddhist in nature.
I think that's a really wise question, Ted. The Soviet Union had actually community centers that included, among other things, Eastern Asian style practices, including meditation. So it actually had secular venues to practice meditative activities. And so that was one thing that clearly illustrates that you can have meditation without the religious infrastructure. I think there are also some secular centers coming up, or some secular venues for doing meditation. So I myself have founded a secular center, co-founded a secular meetup group as part of the humanist community of Central Ohio here in Columbus, Ohio, where I'm located. And Rick Heller, who you mentioned at the beginning, he serves as a leader of a group in Harvard, at the humanist community of Harvard. So there are some secular venues to practice that very thing.
It's good to see that evolution of how contemplative practices are becoming more mainstream in our society. But I want us to talk a bit now, if we can shift the conversation to your organization. Tell us about what that is and what you want to see happen. What are the aspirations for it?
I'll be glad to share about it. So the organization is called Intentional Insights, and it's essentially an organization that helps people reach their own goals through improving their thinking, feeling, and behavior patterns using research-based strategies, which of course include contemplation practice, as well as other strategies. So where the organization came from. So I told you that my background is in psychology, cognitive neuroscience, behavioral economics. I looked at the literature, so I know the literature about how the people think and feel and behave and why they do so. But there's such a lack of popularization of this stuff, of the actual recent literature on how our minds work, how our minds function, what we do, how our emotions function, how our behaviors function, how those things are all interrelated. And the main thing is, how can we apply this knowledge to everyday life to improve our beliefs, our behavior, our thoughts and emotions, and how can we improve our lives as a result? Because, the only things, I'm going to go deep here, the only things that we control in life is our own thoughts, our own emotions, and our own behaviors. Nothing else. We don't really have any control of the outside environment. We can only control our responses to it. We can control only for our thoughts, our feelings, and behaviors. So really the quintessential thing, the key thing for us to become better human beings and achieve our goals in life, whatever they happen to be, is to make that realization and improve the way we think, feel, and behave in order to achieve our goals. So that's kind of the basic foundational idea of intentional insights. And what the organization strives to do is to share these strategies based on the research on how we can practically implement into everyday life tools and instruments for improving our thinking, feeling, and behaviors to reach our goals. So I'm telling you, the way the organization came about It's partially from my teaching of this material in my college classes and seeing how well the students responded to it, and seeing that they didn't really have opportunities outside of college to get this sort of information. So I started thinking that, well, I'm making an impact on people, and it's a great impact. I could really see how students flower in my classes as they're more able to achieve their life goals and succeed in life as a result of taking my classes. And they told me how much they benefited. You know, there was a student in my class who, when we talked about the concept of, something that's a common human thinking error is going for short-term rewards over much larger long-term rewards. And it's a thinking error that the literature calls hyperbolic discounting, that we discount excessively discount the value of future goals. And so she was telling me, I was talking to my students about this concept, and she made a really deep realization that she had a hip problem. So that she needed to correct through major surgery. Now, she can have the surgery whenever she wanted, but the hip problem would keep growing worse over time. So when I shared about this strategy and this common thinking error, she realized that she was falling into it and that she was not getting the surgery. She was just delaying the difficulty of getting the surgery. And her whole life would be so much better off if she got the surgery now as opposed to later. So this was a major surgery that would take her out of commission for about a year. But she decided that, okay, at the end of the spring semester, she's going to take a leave of absence from college for a year, and she's just going to go and get that surgery because she'll be just so much better off the rest of her life. And, you know, the earlier she gets it, the better she would be, in other words. So that's an example of how it impacted my students. And having seen this powerful, and there are many other examples, having seen this powerful impact, I felt it obligatory upon me to try to bring this information to a broader public. And so my wife and I, and she's also really passionate about this stuff. And so I'm the content expert in the content stuff, and she's an expert in nonprofit management and marketing. She has an MBA and over 10 years of experience. So we decided to co-found this organization called Intentional Insights, and the website is intentionalinsights.org, and you can go there to check out the kind of things the organization does, which is we basically post articles on how to reach your goals by improving your thinking, feeling, and behavior patterns. We post videos, short videos and long videos. We post various memes and images that help convey these ideas to a broad audience, and many other strategies. So this is what the organization is, and this is what it does.
Tell us about how mindfulness fits into that work.
Mindfulness is a really important aspect of science-based strategies to improve your thinking. So there's a lot of research. You mentioned MBSR, mindfulness-based stress reduction. John Kabat-Zinn is the key figure in mindfulness-based stress reduction, and he ran the early studies starting from the late 1970s showing that mindfulness of various sorts, mindfulness meaning awareness of in the moment of what we're experiencing, what we're doing, why we're doing it, a connection to our broader place in the universe and our broader long-term goals at every moment while being aware of our senses. That's kind of the broad mindfulness. And then more specifically, meditation, which is really focused attention on something specific. It doesn't need to be sitting in a lotus pose. It's just really focused attention on something specific. Those are the two big things, mindfulness and meditation. Now, he showed that mindfulness and meditation help us reduce physical pain. They also help us improve various physiological symptoms. I'm going to talk about physical symptoms. They help reduce things like heart attacks, strokes. They help improve stomach function, things like that. Now, this is because there's a strong tie-in between the brain and the body. So mindfulness has been shown to reduce cortisol, which is a stress hormone, and that is a really bad hormone. You want as little cortisol as possible. So cortisol negatively impacts a whole lot of regions in your body. Like I said, the stomach, the heart, it negatively impacts the brain, other things as well. Now that's physical health. But mindfulness also improves mental health. So it helps you be more focused and concentrated. It improves your willpower, your ability to concentrate and not take that second piece of chocolate cake.
or third.
Or third sometimes. Right. If you're a journeyman, if you're a beginner mindfulness practitioner, improves willpower, it improves attention. So we're able to learn better, we're able to notice more things in our environment. We're able to notice when the veins on our boss's forehead start to bubble up, so we know we're saying the wrong thing and we can stop before we make an even bigger mistake. So it makes us more attentive to other people. Some forms of mindfulness make us more compassionate and empathetic, which is quite useful for feeling better and more connected to other people. So all of these things, and there are lots of other benefits of mindfulness and meditation. So since all of these things are science-based, research-based content, we integrate them into all aspects of intentional insights activities, including practical strategies for how to apply various psychological literature findings, cognitive neuroscience findings, and behavioral economics findings to everyday life.
So tell us about your book, Find Your Purpose Using Science, because you've also included contemplative practices in there as well.
So the book, Find Your Purpose Using Science, basically takes the literature on psychology, the segment of literature in psychology, cognitive neuroscience, and medicine, not too much in behavioral economics, but cognitive neuroscience, psychology, and medicine that talks about how to find meaning and purpose in life. Now, meaning and purpose in life, I mentioned, that's an area of my research that I did in the Soviet Union. And it's been shown, literature shows that we don't need a religious infrastructure to find meaning and purpose. That in the Soviet Union, people found meaning and purpose in other ways besides religion. And so it's not religion itself that gives meaning and purpose, but the infrastructure that religion provides that gives meaning and purpose. So these are the three broad areas that you need to have in order to cultivate a rich sense of personal meaning and purpose in life. A sense of self-reflection. So self-reflection on yourself, on what gives you meaning and purpose. A sense of community. So community bonding, social bonds with other people. And then a sense of serving others. So these are the three broad research-based strategies that one needs to have, that one needs to engage in to cultivate a deep and rich sense of meaning and purpose in life. And the book goes through all of these. It talks about specific ways to achieve all of these strategies. There's a web app associated with the book that's a science-based instrument to allow you to measure your current sense of meaning and purpose and see how it changes over time. So that's about the book itself. Now, specifically about meaning and purpose, there's a lot of ways you can use meditation as a tool of self-reflection to enrich your sense of meaning and purpose. So that's a specific way I integrate it into the book.
Gleb, is there anything else you'd like to share with the listeners?
There are a number of meditation practices, such as Zazen or state of being, where you simply focus on emptying your mind of thoughts that are very functional to increase the amount of time between when we experience an external stimulus and when we react to it. And that is really, really important. There are two systems of thinking, what the research shows. There's a system of thinking called the autopilot system, the emotional system, or system one, a number of ways of calling it. It's the instinctive, emotional, intuitive system. It turns on in a few milliseconds after an external stimulus. And it's just the emotional reaction that we get from it. There's a second system called system 2, or the intentional system of thinking. And this system of thinking takes about a second to turn on. It's slow, deliberative, and takes energy. But that system is the more rational, it's the rational system. It's the system that we need to make much wiser decisions. So if we can increase the time between the emotional system and turning on and the intentional system turning on, between the reaction that we have to external stimuli, we are much less likely to make a mistake in what we do, in how we react to external stimuli. So again, if a boss tells you that you're doing the wrong thing, the intuitive reaction is to just be defensive, or for some people, be aggressive. How can you tell me that thing? I'm doing the right thing. Or be defensive. I don't want to hear this. I don't want to listen to this. But the rational thing to do would be to take a minute and think about what your boss is saying and see if your goals would be achieved by talking back to your boss or improving your behavior based on your boss's commentary. It might be the case that your goals include not getting fired, and therefore you might want to take a little bit of time to respond appropriately to what your boss says. So that form of meditation, the Zazen or empty mind meditation, would help you achieve that goal of not reacting instantly to what your boss says or whatever other stimulus you have.
Thank you, Gleb. For those who are listening, you can find out more about Gleb's work at intentionalinsights.org. Our guest today, Gleb Tsipursky. Gleb, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for inviting me, Ted.
Thanks for listening. If you'd like to learn more about something you've heard in today's podcast, please come visit the website at presentmomentmindfulness.com. You'll find an entire webpage devoted to this and every episode. You can comment on the episode page and find show notes and other helpful resources for your mindfulness practice. The shakuhachi music heard on Present Moment is used by permission and through the generosity of musician Rodrigo Rodriguez. His website is linked on the Present Moment website on the About Podcast Music page. Sound editing, mixing, and mastering provided by the generosity of Anthony Dominello of StructureFromSound.com. Until next time, remember, every moment you have a choice. Make it the best you can. See you next time on Present Moment.